Thank you. My name is Louis Curtis. I'm the director of a group called Microsoft Services Disaster Response. We help communities in their time of need for free. We come in and fix technology that's been broken, or rapidly design new technology quickly and new solutions as fast as possible to reduce human suffering and stabilize the area. And so one of the things I'm going to be talking about today is some of the lessons we've learned, what we've done, and the idea of for architects to empower you to do the same. Now this is you might see, let me push the button, you might see some really good presentations today about strategy. And you're going to see some wonderful ones, and I encourage you to go to all of them. This is not one of them. This is about tactical execution and capability to help and organize your teams and your capability in times of distress, and helping you. And if you want to, you can develop your own program similar to this for your own companies and your own organizations to help communities in their time of need. So let's get to it. So there's a lot of challenges in communities when they experience a disaster, whether it's man-made or whether it's a natural disaster. And so we know how to rebuild this. The neighborhoods get demolished. We have search and rescue teams. I used to be a volunteer fireman and EMT. We know how to do the reconstruction and the activities to shift into a neighborhood around immediate disaster response and disaster relief capabilities into these areas. But the funny thing happened, as we moved into a more technical world and there's less paper systems, we're very dependent on technology. And when technology is destroyed, when data centers are destroyed, it starts to impact people's lives that it didn't used to before. So things like getting medication or even getting paid, things that can increase suffering, human suffering, things like getting clothing and housing and food and water. It's amazing how dependent we see these core critical systems in society that's dependent on IT infrastructure, like we all on the phone have designed in one time or another. And so communities are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by the nature of what's going on. Things are broken. Things are needed. They're in a new reality that they've never experienced before. Whether it's a small incident like like a terrorist event in a major city, or a major earthquake that demolishes an entire country. They face very similar challenges consistently over time. And that's what we found out. And so, managing crisis. I like to talk about the things that go through response agencies' minds and communities' minds when they're trying to navigate the world to create new solutions or fix the old ones to be able to stabilize the area and reduce human suffering. They're trying to deal with these kind of pressures. And it really gets into three things around they're going to collaborate with groups that they've never had to collaborate with before. They have to communicate in ways and in people that they haven't communicated before. And they're going to have to analyze data and information and process that information in ways they've never done before. And that's what the new reality means. And you can see all these things that, the 8 areas, but those are the 3 real buckets that you see. And so what communities do, and when they have technical needs, in a crisis, whether it's an earthquake or an event, is you'll have a hackathon. And so we all love hackathons. And hackathons are great, and we've used them many times. And a lot of enthusiastic people come in and love to conquer a small problem very quickly. And that's great. But one of the things that we've noticed is once you need things to scale serious levels, not and be secure and really fortified where it's being hacked all over the world. Major systems that have to be developed really quickly to help a community in their time of need, or handle things like refugees and refugee families and help them and process privacy information. You don't want that information getting out. You don't want to do this clumsily. You want to have a good support model. You want to do it as fast as possible and responsibly as possible. Have them have the documentation. You get this Band-Aid up and you get them fixed, and you set them up for success as the disaster and relief operation ends. And so there's a place for hackathons, but there's also a place for responsible technical mission teams, and that's what I focus on a lot. Is that mission critical capability that's needed in the communities. And so the things that we noticed, there's increasing pressures. We'll see. It used to be about maybe 5 years ago, we had 1 to 2 major disasters, like major earthquakes that the world noticed, and then about 70 regional disasters. And today, we've got about 5 or 6 major disasters and events that happen every year that's globally impacting. And then we have hundreds of regional events now. Whatever whether it's climate change and human distress, whatever the reasons are, we don't focus on that as much. We focus on being the helpers, and whatever is needed to help to do the work is what needs to be done. And so things like, and the other challenge that we're seeing is there's new software and tools and capability that's, and giving software is not enough for Microsoft. We found it, if you give the latest and greatest software capabilities from Azure or Office 365 or some of these new technologies, they're changing almost every month. And communities in distress don't have time to learn how to learn new technologies to fix a problem. That's just not feasible. And what we often note that in a disaster, you have access to 50% of your staff operating at 50% mental capacity. Roll the dice on it and see where it gets you. And so we've actually had some customers do that, and they were quite surprised how difficult it was. But it's true, and good people make mistakes. Good, smart, wonderful people make mistakes under stress. And so this is why when we manage teams, and I'm going to tell you some of the things, how to manage those teams and manage your groups when you start your own program, how to do that successfully, like having team groups, teaming and activities. And so MSDR is a program across domain organization that can pull people from any organization within Microsoft. We pay for it, all the travel and all the, they get credit for it. It's not volunteer time. We pay them as a customer we can pull people from the product teams, Microsoft Research, Services, DPE, or DX organization now. And so this is, we send people on site, we activate call centers, they work rapidly on a big problem, and then lock it down as fast as humanly possible to address that human suffering issues. And this is something that we, it took years to get the executives to buy off in, and once they did, it is remarkable. So, but it did take time, many years, twice a year, doing proposals and getting rejected. And after a while, they really warmed up to it after we proved it and proved it and proved it. So, let's see. This is the MSDR program. I did it, right? Our goals, our motto is innovate, adapt, and overcome. We focus on, with all architects and project managers and groups, they focus on accuracy, impact, and speed. Doing the right thing, making the biggest business impact possible, and doing it as fast as possible. We really emphasize, as architects, business architects will focus on impact, and you'll see a lot of solution architects that focus on accuracy and making sure that it's technically accurate often. But we focus on speed. We overly emphasize speed, more important, and then we'll make compromises in some of the other areas, like like a minimal UI design or things that might be aesthetically pleasing to get the mission done as fast as possible and get it to scale and get it locked down. The security, the privacy, the scalability and capacity to meet that need to address human suffering as fast as possible, be that Band-Aid, and then let that, as they move into a relief operation, they can do something else. But that's what we focus on, lots of speed. So we showcase Microsoft's technologies because they pay our bill, and they pay for us, and we're grateful. And Microsoft has a tremendous amount of technical assets and capabilities that they want to showcase and show that they can help communities in their time of need. So it's an honor to do it, and I love doing it. And the wonderful thing about it is we've had alpha technologies, we've had, we work with product teams, and they've actually adapted their products for a disaster relief scenario and a mission that we had to address, which was fantastic. The enthusiasm is amazing. And then we help other groups take the lessons we've learned from being in real disasters and real operations, and as they develop best-in-class resilient government solutions, to talk about what's real and what's not. And there's a lot of fiction out there around continuity of operations, and there's a lot, I'll tell you a joke in a while, but but we have learned a couple of lessons. So if we take a look at this, let me see if I can, oh, yeah, there we go. This is just, so if you look at our operations over the last 5 years, we've done over 174 assessments, 154 missions, over 30 countries, and over 400 full-time employees have been engaged in humanitarian missions around the world to help communities in their time of need. And one of the things that we can talk about is things like Superstorm Sandy. We had lots of break-fix missions. So the world was all about on-prem systems. And today, what we have more is what we call complex missions. And how do we help? How do we design new solutions very quickly to reduce human suffering and stabilize the area? So now the majority of our missions now are complex. So you'll see us use the word mission instead of engagement. Often you'll see consulting agencies or services teams say the word engagement, and that's a paid-for experience by a customer. Mission is a gratuitous event that's part of philanthropy. We're partnered tightly with philanthropy and global security and legal, and we're very explicit that we have to separate sales activity and those sales processes and assets from all philanthropic assets. And so that's why we call it a mission and treat it differently as well. This is to let you know a process. I'll go through this process a little bit more in detail for you as we get started. But we have a ramp-up period for a disaster operation, and then a transition period. And that's what you want to do in any organization or community. Have that process from beginning to end that for that life cycle. That's super critical. What we've noticed is this consistent model scales from the smallest incident, like being in Orlando or Charlotte or Flint, when we responded there, or the Navajo Nation, to something as big as Nepal or Hurricane Sandy or Ecuador or Japan, multiple earthquakes in Japan, and Operation, the same thing, even in Ebola, when we did Ebola operations. So it's the having that consistent core structure will help you as an architect have an execution capability, an execution model for you to be successful with. And that's whatever agencies are going to help, or whatever groups you're going to help inside or outside of your organization, having that consistent core structure, that process flow, and that structure is going to help you. So let's get from the process to how you manage teams differently. If you look at IT teams, they're smart, they have a lot of enthusiasm, they know their technologies, you're going to assemble the right people and players together for that specific mission, and you've got to help them be successful. They're going to be under stress. They might have never experienced a disaster in their life. They're going to have their own anxieties as well, and their own enthusiasms as well. And they're going to see things that they might have never saw before. I tell you that, like, the first time I saw in a country where I was seeing women feed their kids in foxholes with soup made out of chicken feathers, living in rubble for miles, for everywhere the eye to see, that affects you. It's going to affect them. And how you help them, and how do you prepare them, and how do you make things consistent for them, is the difference between them being successful and them having a problem. And that's important. So one of the things that I focus on as a what we call tactical execution model is having a consistent core execution structure for something that eliminates the bureaucracy, eliminates so much pain for the subs, the mission members, the legal, all the bureaucracy. This consistent core structure that's repeatable over and over and over again, no matter what disaster we do. So every time we have an operation, so an operation is one event, like an earthquake or a tsunami or a terrorist event, and then that operation will have several missions in it. And so how do we deal with missions is it's a marriage between the field in the local area. So we have people who are local in that geographic area, or hire people to go into that area to understand the situation. What's the how that area is subdivided, and how those agencies, which agencies are hurt, which ones need help, and we structure ourselves based on that. So the idea of we can do task force teams. This task force team will be changed depending on what the need is, and that's what I call diverse endpoints. And so the diverse endpoint model is, for example, if you say mobilization day. So this mobilization day, we mobilize, we're going to have an operation, and we say we only need a shooting like in Orlando. When we had the shooting in Orlando, that was one task force team, one mission team, and that mission team was coming into the event happened during the weekend. We started Monday. We had the team mobilized to work to 3 o'clock in the morning every night until before the president landed on the tarmac on Thursday to announce the oneorlando.org site to raise money for the victims' families, so they could announce it and raise money. And so we had the digital crimes unit, and we had the red team, security team, massive scalability team, from the product group in Azure, look at it and customize it and to make sure it's scaled. And because there was massive attacks from internationally and domestically, on the site as well. So you have to deal with those kind of issues, and so having that mission be successful and secure is important, so they can do that. So that was just one task force. Mobilization A might be something that I might need, 2 task force groups, and the task force groups need to be subdivided between, public sector and commercial or something like that. And you want to be able to be able to, and each task force group will have multiple mission groups and mission teams. And those mission teams will be subdivided based on that functionality. Mobilization C might be geographically. So I have mission teams in Geneva, mission teams in Atlanta, in North America, mission teams in Monrovia, mission teams in the Middle East, for the Ebola crisis, where we had task force, these multiple task force groups with multiple mission teams, with multiple agencies operating simultaneously. And it scales out. And what I use previous mission coordinators on past disasters to shadow the new mission coordinators. So we help them triage, we help them, it's like training wheels, as because they have lots of, they have anxiety as well. And so one of the things that we do is we promote, some rules. We promote things like we promote a program called non-anxious presence, NAP training, NAP development. And so how do you develop a non-anxious presence in a crisis situation and be able to triage things carefully? And so we go through those things, that process, that structure, consistent core execution structure with diverse endpoints. That's how you execute with speed. This is how you scale with speed. So no matter what chaos you're dealing with, no matter what unknown requests that come in, you can deal with it. And we train people to listen, as opposed to maybe you might see sales folks, in other technical, our technical company and other technical companies, we all do. Everybody has their menu of technologies that they sell and promote, and their solution that they've developed, whether it's a consulting agency or a technology company. But in a disaster, people don't know those names, those terminologies, those capabilities. It's useless. The most important thing, we train the mission coordinators and the teams to go in and just listen to say, hey, what do you need help with? What's your pain? Something went down, you can't collaborate with, you need to, with 200 different agencies you've never done before. You've got to communicate. You've got to, analyze massive amounts of information. And that's what we find out. Maybe there's things to fix. It's listening instead of, and then listening and then activating the team, go through triage and addressing the situation, rather than trying to educate the customer on what our technology is or what anybody else's technology is. And that's what's important. So for my model, what we use in a consistent core structure is I utilize a variation of the incident command system. And the incident command system is a consistent structure. It's an internationally recognized model that every country uses in some fashion or another. And it's even the colors. If I say if I go to Japan or New Zealand or Spain or any of these other countries, and I say I'm an operations chief or a logistics chief in the incident command system, another incident commander will absolutely know exactly what I do and know how to use me and know exactly where I fit in his team or her team. And that's important. Speak their language. Don't speak yours. Speak theirs. And it also helps. It helps when you create a structure. It actually helps with speed. You have a faster team. And so this is what an example model of for a technical disaster, for technology disaster management, when you're designing new apps really quickly or fixing other systems. And so you don't want to be making these things up every time in a disaster. You want to structure, you have a finance model, you have a logistics model, hardware, software, internet access, food, transports, passports, getting the employee safety models that you're, that's tracking your teams, making sure they're in a safe place. You have planning teams that are doing strategic triage. So you don't want your operations teams doing triage, you just want them doing the work you assign them to do. Let the planners do the triage. Look at strategic dependencies, making sure which ones are addressing human suffering or stabilization or whatever your priorities are, and make those assignments, work on demobilization, impact assessments, all of those things. Separate teams. Don't make your mission teams do that work in blue, ever, or yellow or green, ever. You want them just doing the work. And then red is the operations section. That's where your task force groups, that's where your mission teams are, and how you scale. That's where you get your flexible influence. You have liaisons to other business units or other agencies, employee welfare teams. You have an incident command lead and a leadership team. And it's a hierarchical model because you have to have chiefs and leads in these sections so you can move quickly. And it's important, and it works. When you're working with people, you're going to have lots of people being very exuberant. So having that consistent core structure gives you the ability, and this is what I've done, there's a lot of jobs in my back pocket I can assign, very important jobs. So things like impact capture and situational awareness, and safety assignments or outreach capabilities. So make sure you get people assigned focused responsibilities. Make them accountable for that. And everybody this whole effort is not what we call best effort volunteer activity. Everybody who works on an SDR mission is accountable. My job is to be accountable for the safety and success of all these, all operations and missions. But that accountability goes right across the line with everybody else. Making sure that safety, that success, everybody is committed to the success of that mission, no matter what. It's not a best effort, it's not a volunteer effort, not do the best we can. When we commit to it, we do it. We finish it. And if it takes extra investment to do it, we just do it. That makes a difference. That makes a difference in morale. It makes a difference in the teams. It makes a difference with your customer, your agency, or the group that you're helping. And so this is where we've created a rule called, if you're doing it alone, you're doing it wrong. And everyone has to have a backup, including myself, that helps you through this process. That you're not going into a customer or an agency or nonprofit or NGO alone. You have help because there's a lot of stressors. There's a lot of anxious people around you. And you need help to keep your focus, keep that non-anxious presence, and remind you, the mission teams, to do that. So these are a little different than how regular consulting or technical teams are regularly managed. So if you look at our structure, this is an older model, but it still applies. What we have, there's stakeholders, and I have a variety of stakeholders that invest in this operation and get rid of roadblocks when I need them. Whether it's things that, like, if the president or prime minister of Nepal has special requests that have to be, addressed, we have teams that can help do that. But when I focus on these missions, and you look at coordination and communications, risk governance activities, operational command, escalations, planning, impact measurement, operational safety, planning, call center management, all these things that you try to coordinate, and all the logistics, all the finance and activities, for the teams or your task force teams to be successful is incredibly important. the bottom is like the task force model that's been divided. This is just an example. You can divide it any way you want. And that's a critical function around how to make sure that the teams are moving as fast as possible, and how are you increasing their speed, how are you getting rid of roadblocks, how are you helping them for each day that they're addressing a mission faster. That's lives that are impacted. And so I talked about the difference between break-fix missions and complex missions. Break-fix missions are things that break, and you have to return to service. Your DR plan sometimes works, sometimes not. You don't control that. Complex missions is about advanced IT recovery and design. And so new solutions, it's often developing new solutions that didn't exist before. And so just making it happen. That's critical. Next is having some governance. And so if you develop your program and you want to have an execution model, you have to have governance. You start with some, for Microsoft, there's no customer requirement. We actually cannot tie missions with sales opportunities in any capacity. And then our safety is number one. I have partnership with global security and global security teams to monitor our mission teams on site. We got reports. When I had the Jordan team and the team that was in Jordan and Cairo and Turkey, and we had global security monitoring the whole time, making sure that they were operating in that same thing, in Nepal, same thing, Ecuador. Missions must comply with specific laws and regulations in that country. That's incredibly important. One of the things that we do is I have a two-stage process where the local country vets the declaration of emergency, as well as the corporate teams vet declarations of emergency, and it's an agreement process. They have to agree with each other that who can we help and who can we not help, what export rules do we need to abide by, international export rules we need to abide by, and to make sure that works. And so one of the things that we have a process and a question, an operational process that goes through that to make sure that we're not violating anti-bribery laws or local in that country, because oftentimes most countries, when they do a declaration of emergency, they subside those laws to give private companies the ability to donate to government agencies without violating anti-bribery laws, so you can reduce human suffering as fast as possible. And so that's critical. Though I get that information, and what I do is I add the safety, any complex safety information or legal and our regulatory information. We adjust our compliance laws and compliance rules as we triage these missions. So things like the mission has to be the result of immediate disaster, and it must help reduce human suffering and stabilize the area. It's got to be tightly scoped. Think Band-Aid instead of like an enterprise solution. We want to have, you're going to triage this, you're going to architect the solution within a day or within an hour, pretty much. And funny thing is, most great architects, what I'm finding out, I've seen a lot of really good architects, 80% of what they do within hours is what the customer ultimately decides that it's the most optimal model, which is the hilarious part. But it's just a side thing that I found so much. So when you're having your teams, when you set up a program, you're going to have to deal with triaging and understanding which missions to do first, because you're going to have lots of organizations and agencies calling out to you for help. For me, what we do is we divide it into two groups: human suffering or stabilization. Human suffering is more important than stabilization. but stabilization is very important as well. So we triage the human suffering missions for every hour that this solution is not deployed. People are not fed. People don't have food or clothing or medicine. That's human suffering. I remember when Hurricane Sandy happened, then everybody was using the 411 system in New York City, and was it the 411, I believe, to report the trees being down, and they overwhelmed the system fairly quickly, and it crashed. So then they started calling 911, and then everybody called 911 about trees, and 911 system went down. And the problem with 911 going down is that's 10,000 lives a day that system is operationally managing to save. That's a big hit. And so now that 411 system became super, super important as a mission when we were doing that mission. And so restoring 411 became really, really important. So that's how we triage, and make it open, make it show the people, and if agency says, which ones are you doing first and last, and this is it. This is my rules. This is what's going on, and this is it. And they usually understand pretty quickly. So track and monitor your missions. If they have software needs, they have hardware needs, they have specific skill needs, they have support needs, they have education needs. What specific architectural redesigns that's needed, specific code, all of those are important. Just because you're doing something fast doesn't mean you're going to hack and rack this. By far, the last thing you should do is hack and rack and just do anything everybody says. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And maybe I should talk about this now. In Haiti, there was another consulting group working with Haiti. And the Haitian government wanted their own people tracking system. They didn't want to use Google's or the Red Cross, International Red Cross. We encouraged them to use both, by the way. We said Google's system is pretty good, and so is the International Red Cross. It's a good system. We're not going to, and we don't encourage redesigning a people tracking system during the middle of a disaster. Use one that works. So they said they wanted to use their own, and they wanted to do it themselves, and so they just did it themselves. And during a disaster in Haiti, their declaration of emergency relaxes all privacy rules. Same in the Philippines, same in a lot of countries. They relaxed all the privacy rules. So what they did is create a people tracking system so everybody could find everybody everywhere. Problem is, bad people started using it to track down children and put them in the sex slave trade. And it was a disaster. Triage carefully. Understanding the impact. Just because another place, an agency, relaxes privacy rules doesn't mean you do. Be responsible. And this is why you track it, look at the request, make it visible to everybody. You want every mission you do be extremely visible and transparent as you're doing it. And that's important. Whatever collaboration software you're using, whether it's Google's or ours or anybody else's, or it's important to do that. And don't forget bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is a big deal as you're doing the system. And a lot of architects say, I don't need to deal about bureaucracy, but you do. It's all about making your teams fast and impactful, getting your teams as fast as possible, getting rid of these things, making sure they have the right tools and capability and readiness, making sure the travel and budgets and all the codes they need to work with, legal compliance, all those processes are done. They don't have to think about it. They want a communication template, got it. They want a legal compliance analysis, got it. Here's your template, This is what you do. You go through the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Boom, send it to this group. It's done. They don't have to think. They just have to do. And you know, getting them execute it. You know, that they're not having to reinvent a strategy or a capability. They can focus on the execution of the technology and capability they, the talent they have. And the last, well, not really last, it's learn to do it better. Take lessons from your account teams, in the field, the relationship teams, your mission teams, and your agencies. Take that information in and learn how to do it better, because you're going to learn every disaster. You're going to have an execution capability and learn that execution capability. So let's talk a little bit more about them, some of the missions that we've done in the past. Superstorm Sandy, almost 90% of the missions were break-fix missions. It was before we're a cloud company, and cloud wasn't really adopted. But shortly after that, Calgary, they were asking for collaboration capability. And then you saw, we found that, in Bosnia, they wanted a disaster response site for refugees and people impacted by the floods to register for help. We saw in the Oza mudslide in Italy and Ecuador and Japan and Nepal, multiple requests for collaboration between agencies. So disaster response agencies and government agencies trying to coordinate with international, domestic and international agencies they've never worked with before, and with whose processes they have no idea, and they don't know each other's processes. And being able to collaborate and communicate with each other and coordinate with each other in order to reduce human suffering as fast as possible. So they're not doubling up on one geographic location. They can spread out. They can look, one of the things that we saw, even in little, regional disasters, look at their Oza mudslide. It was a terrible mudslide. We took out a neighborhood, mile wide, mile long, moving 60 miles an hour, like a meat grinder. It just destroyed that entire community. You went there, and it looked like you're on the moon. It looked like you're on another planet. And it was horrible. I mean, it was just the most horrible thing you've ever seen. I won't even describe the mutilation that thing did. But it's one of the things that happened was there was over 200 agencies that landed over there. Some international agencies. And they were all bumping into each other. They couldn't coordinate with each other. They were trying to send files to each other by driving thumb drives to each other. And they couldn't coordinate. So we created a collaboration system for incident command teams to work together. We just set it up. And then lots of news agencies were asking about the records for Snohomish County for the Oza mudslide, and they were asking for like GIS records, gigabyte files, and this Freedom of Information Act. And their data center just couldn't handle it. They couldn't do any of it. So we took all of their data and all their files. We put it in our data center and created a Microsoft search. At that time, it was the alpha stage, and just wrote a whole program that redirected from them to a search system and an archival system that helped news agencies get the information they need without disrupting the Emergency Operations Center. Orlando, I talked about Orlando. Charlotte, we had there was the public and the press were pressuring the local police department to show a video of an altercation. They did not have the ability to do that. They reached out to us in their declaration of emergency. We uploaded that to Azure to do that and scale that out to the levels they needed. Flint, Charlotte and Flint also had security breaches, and so we had security teams over there. Navajo Nation is when the EPA spilled, contaminated the Animas River and contaminated the entire drinking supply of the largest Native American Indian reservation in the United States. And and they needed help trying to track all the dead sheep and crops that were destroyed, and the ability for them to get fresh water and capability. Alberta forest fires, boundary mapping, coordination systems with the Red Cross, Ecuador. One of the things that we work with Ecuador is they had about 2,300 families that were displaced after multiple earthquakes in Ecuador. And they didn't have any medicine, food, clothing. They were homeless. So Colombia had developed something, a registration system for refugees that were displaced from past events, and they offered it for, up to Ecuador. And so we took that code and refactored a little bit and adjusted it to operate in Azure and scale it out to the level that was needed. So those 2,300 families that could register for help with the Ecuadorian health ministry and the Prime Minister's President's office for help, medicine, and clothing and food. And so Ebola and the Syrian refugees, both of those operations are pretty big operations. We had lots of data analysis, doing data insights and data analysis around massive amounts of information. We did have some collaboration systems that we had to develop for like nurses and other groups on the ground in Monrovia, but also just massive amounts of information for the CDC and World Health Organization. Same for Syrian refugees in Jordan, largest refugee camps in the world. We're working with them around analyzing massive amounts of information to optimize resources to help the families there, as well as we help set up and manage connectivity in multiple countries, like in Greece, for the Syrian refugees, so they could have the families could have connectivity to register for help as well. That partnership was with Cisco. They did a great job as well. And there's a number of lots of activity, like in Nepal, rebuilding data centers, rebuilding operations, creating collaboration systems, for people to work. But you can see a variety of work that you have to do in this, whether it's big events or small events, and that line needs to be updated. It's not 147, it's 154 now. You can see these are the kind of missions and activities that's done. We walk through this process again. You saw this slide again. Global monitoring. We have a monitoring system. Event detected. We go to stage, what we call stage orange, from stage yellow, and we have core mobilization capability to respond as we're responding, whether it's a hurricane coming up into an event or the event already happened and we're in red. We go through this stage. The area sub and area is mobilized. We have resources that set up the codes. Start to do initial outreach. If the declaration of emergency is deployed, we have it reviewed immediately by legal teams. We start to look at export laws, start to mobilize resources to get on the plane to be on site within 48 hours. We get an approval, an executive approval to engage. We start. Once we reach out to say, all right, we're ready, based on the laws and regulatory activities, this is what we can do. Missions engaged, impact and capture reporting, transition to local activities, local relationship teams, inventory of potential lessons, and after action review. So you do this with discipline every single time. This is about tactical execution of your strategy. And so I hope this is helping you if you want to do this for yourself in your company one day, and that's what I encourage. Also, we've learned a little bit about continuity and resiliency, disaster recovery, that most people don't focus on. We have a joke among ourselves. At disaster management conferences, the business continuity and disaster recovery people, during the breaks, they start debating taxonomies. And those of us who do disaster response, we're just all outside smoking. And I don't know if you laugh or not, but if you do disaster response, you get the joke. 80% of what disaster response, disaster recovery and business continuity plans fail miserably. And they have, they're a top-down. They focus on a wonderful strategy, which is very important. The new standards and the new training about focusing on top-down decisions and priority areas are super important. However, they don't focus on execution at all. They don't focus on new designs or dealing with a new reality and designing new technical capability in the middle of a disaster at all. None of the certifications in business continuity, BCI, BRI, they don't deal with that. So instead, this is what we suggest. Some of the things that we've seen is focus on your execution. Get your consolidated prevention plans, the strategies, all the good work. You want to blue ocean it. You want to do every word you want to do to make your strategy awesome. That's great. Verify your execution capability. Well, try to and make sure it's real. Not make people do it for real. With a stopwatch, and make it hard. Tabletop exercises are are never enough. And so you focus on your execution capability. And execution capability comes down to three big things: capability, capacity, and readiness. What kind of capabilities can you execute on under stress? What type of capacity, the amount of missions and activity you can do? What type of readiness and situational awareness that you have on your teams that they can operate and execute consistently, whether it's new training that has to happen on site that day or training that you have to do ahead of time in order to prepare them. Because your execution capability is imperative. So things like doing the response, incoming aid management response, physical security, coordination, getting the right assets to the right people, citizen collaboration, donation process for their platform and processes, community agency coordinations that you have to work with different agencies, so things like your county or municipality or emergency response center needs specific types of capabilities. See, you want to make sure your response capability and your execution capability is what's going to work. Because 9 times out of 10, most business continuity and disaster recovery planners are not accountable for any of the work or plans that they suggest. That's just true. During a disaster, one, most of them have never been in a disaster in their life, and two, when a disaster hits, they're not making any decisions. It's the leadership team and your response teams that are. And your ability to execute is what separates you from everybody else. So with that, I hope this has been worth your time and helpful for you. Thank you.